The Golden Order has been broken. Rise, tarnished, and be guided by grace to brandish the power of the Elden Ring and become an Elden Lord in the lands between. In the lands between, ruled by Queen Marika the Eternal, the Elden Ring, the source of the Erd Tree, has been shattered. Marika's offspring, demigods all, claim the shards of the Elden Ring known as the Great Runes, and the mad taint of their newfound strength triggered a war, the Shattering, a war that meant abandonment by the greater will. And now, the guidance of grace will be brought to the tarnished who were spurned by the grace of gold and exiled from the lands between. Ye dead who yet live, your grace long lost, follow the path to the lands between, beyond the foggy sea, to stand before the Elden Ring and become the Elden Lord. This is a synopsis of the story in Elden Ring that you can find in the official website for the game. A few lines that hold an incredible amount of information, some that we can know and some that we must discover. As a player, we will be the tarnished, but who are they and where do they come from? They, the tarnished, are guided by a grace. What is this grace and what is its source? Exiled from the lands between, they now return. But what was the reason for their exile? And what ties do they have to the lands between? These lands have a ruler in Queen Marika and a symbol in the Erd Tree, a manifestation of the Elden Ring's power. What relationship do they hold to each other and to the grace the tarnished follow? And of course, the lords, all offsprings of Marika and holders of the shattered ring in the form of the Great Runes. What is their involvement in the current war, and how have they contributed to the abandonment of the greater will? All of this, of course, under one very important question: what is the Golden Order? Believe it or not, there is a lot more information about Elden Ring's story than we might believe. It is time to go over everything that has been published and piece it together to understand the basic lore of the lands between, of the tarnished, and of course, of the Elden Ring. Join me as we compile, organize, and speculate about what is surely to be the best souls to ever exist. Please be advised that a part of this video will contain information that I have compiled from different videos, articles, and interviews that have been published in regards to the Elden Ring. In contrast, there will be a part of this video that is speculation of a few aspects that I was not able to find conclusive information on. Each part will be marked clearly, so you understand what is what. At this time, speculation is a very futile endeavor as we have very little information. Nevertheless, it is extremely fun, especially since it is such an intricate part of the lore of the souls. We currently have access to a basic outline of the story that this game will offer us and the part that we will play in it. Some questions are answered and others are left to be discovered. So far, we know that the lands between, the vast territory that is ruled and controlled by Marika and her demigod offspring, is under the blessing of the Elden Ring, which is symbolized by the power and presence of the Erd Tree. This blessing is manifested by the grace of gold that exists in all of the people, both great and small, and it is represented by the golden aura that appears in their eyes. But it seems that this blessing is not eternal, and after some time, certain individuals lost this golden aura. With no light in their eyes, these individuals were labeled as tarnished and exiled from the lands between. The tarnished are a group of individuals that lived and prospered in the lands between, but were forced to leave them after losing its blessing. It appears that there are no tarnished in the lands between, until they are guided to return by the same grace that abandoned them. We, the players, are not originally from the lands between, but we are descendants of those tarnished that were exiled in the first place. In its time of need, the Erd Tree, symbolizing the grace of the Elden Ring, calls upon the tarnished to return and stand before those that ruined the land with warfare. At this time, we know that the Elden Ring was destroyed, shattered, by something or someone, in a historic event that forever changed the lands between, split into 6 separate pieces called Great Runes. The demigods, children of Marika, each claimed a shard of the Elden Ring as their own. This began the Shattering, a war of such proportions that brought ruin and destruction not only to the lands between, but also to its inhabitants. With the greater will abandoning the land and its people, the grace was lost. The shards of the Elden Ring, the Great Runes, hold so much power that it was difficult for the lords to handle. Each of them inherited a different element of the Elden Ring's power, and each of them were tainted, cursed, and warped in a different way. With the land in ruin and its power shattered, the grace of gold returns to the tarnished and guides them back into the lands between to face the lords and reforge the Elden Ring, becoming, in this manner, an Elden Lord. But will the tarnished answer this call? Will they fight to restore the lands between to their former glory? Or will they hold vengeance in their heart for an injustice against them? That is up to you, the player, to decide. While we are able to have a basic understanding of Elden Ring's story, there are still many questions left unanswered. More importantly, there are a few key questions on which we have no information at all. The most important is the Golden Order. What is it, and what is its purpose? The first thing to notice is that the Golden Order implies an order that is golden. As obvious as that sounds, please bear with me as it has great implications. For you see, the lore of Elden Ring is very closely tied to the semantics of gold and its language. The blessings, favors, and strength offered by the Elden Ring through the Erd Tree is always described as golden. In relation to this, although opposite, is the tarnished. The word tarnished describes when gold loses its shine or luster. In this case, in the case of Elden Ring, it is when a person loses the shine or luster of the aura in their eyes. Better said, when they lose the shine of the grace of gold. It is easy to determine that anything related to the Elden Ring or to the Erd Tree will be explained through the presence of gold or described in a golden fashion. As a result, it is my belief that the Golden Order is the order related to the Elden Ring, the Erd Tree, and their power. But we cannot stop the analysis here. While we can determine that the Golden Order is related to the Elden Ring through its golden nature, we still don't know what it is. For this, we have to look at what an order means. In all honesty, the word order has many definitions that apply to many different contexts. That said, there are a few that could apply to the situation of the Elden Ring. First, order can be defined as a society of monks, priests, nuns, etc. that live according to certain religious and social regulation and discipline. In other words, a church. It is not inconceivable that the Golden Order is a church that follows the principles and powers of the Elden Ring and the Erd Tree through its worship. This is a possibility, but not the only one. The second definition of order that I want to highlight is as follows. Order can be a particular social, political, or economic system of organization. In the case of Elden Ring, I am more interested in the social and political aspect rather than the economic. Under this definition, the Golden Order can be the organization of the social or political structure of the lands between, under the power of the Elden Ring. In other words, how status and power is divided in the lands between. So now, we have two possibilities that we can agree to be probable. The Golden Order can be a church that follows, worships, tends to, etc. the Elden Ring, or it can be the structure of power found within the lands between under the Elden Ring. What we do know for sure is that the Golden Order has been broken and that the Shattering had a lot to do with it. We know that the Shattering is the war that broke out when the Elden Ring was destroyed. We also know that the Golden Order was broken due to this war, due to the Shattering. So, it is easy to believe that the Golden Order before the Shattering is very different than the one after the Shattering. This could be as simple as a church being destroyed, or as complicated as the whole structure of the lands between being shaken to its core. In my opinion, the Golden Order is the social and political structure that organizes the lands between before the Shattering. When the Shattering happens and the Golden Order is destroyed, the whole structure of the lands between changes abruptly, resulting in the Tarnished returning to the lands between and rising up against the Lords. To make it easier to understand, I want to show you what the Golden Order could be before the Shattering and what it could be after the Shattering once it is destroyed. Allow me to show you this first chart. I believe that this is the Golden Order before the Shattering, before the Elden Ring was destroyed. The Golden Order places the Elden Ring at the very top as the source of power of the Grace of Gold and all of the inhabitants of the lands between. Right after the Elden Ring sits the Tree as the physical manifestation and symbol of the Elden Ring's power and grace. These two sit at the top as the most powerful entities in the Golden Order of the lands between. Immediately below the Elden Ring sits Queen Marika, the Eternal. We do not know a lot about her, but we do have the information that she is a goddess and ruler of the lands between. We do not know what her relationship to the Elden Ring is, if any exists, but we do know that her power sits below that of the Elden Ring. Further below Marika the Eternal are her children, the Lords, all demigods with Marika's blood within them. Now, I only show a total of 6 Lords because, as we know, that is how many shards of Elden Ring there are. 6 shards to 6 Lords. That said, there could very well be additional Lords that did not get a shard of the Elden Ring. For now, we will remain with the 6 that took upon them great runes. These will be the main bosses of the game. Below the Lords is everyone else. Every single other inhabitant of the lands between appear at this level. Remember, the Grace of Gold appears in everyone, both great and small, so every single inhabitant of the lands between has this aura of light in their eyes. As such, they all have the right to remain. At the last level sit the lowly Tarnished. They are the inhabitants of the lands between that lost the Grace of Gold. Their eyes lost the aura of light, and as such, they were exiled from the lands between. We do not know where they were exiled to, but we do know that it is across the foggy sea. This is the Golden Order, the organization of every person, of every soul that exists in the lands between. This is how the lands between were organized before the Shattering, before the setting of the game that we will play. But, as we know, the Golden Order was destroyed, and, in its place, a new order began. Next, I want to show you this second chart that I made. In this chart, I want to show you what I believe is the Golden Order after the Shattering, after the Elden Ring was destroyed. At the very top, there is still the Elden Ring. That said, it is no longer whole, It has been shattered, and its pieces spread amongst the lords. The Erd Tree still stands as its symbol, but it is weakened, and the grace of gold is now lost. Marika, the Eternal, still sits as the ruler of the lands between, but we do not know if the shattering of the Elden Ring affected her at all. Is she weaker? Is she stronger? Did she absorb some of the Elden Ring's power, like the lords tried to do? At this time, it is impossible to understand what her situation is after the shattering. That said, we know that she is still the ruler of the lands between. And below Marika, her children remain, but they have suffered great changes. The demigods, offspring of Marika, each took a shard of the broken Elden Ring. Each shard, known as the Great Rune, holds incredible power to such an extent that the lords were unable to tame it. The power corrupted the lords, tainted them, warped them into creatures of grotesque appearance and incredible power. Each lord took a shard of a different element belonging to the Elden Ring's power, and, as such, they were each tainted in a different manner. We know that each of these 6 tainted lords will be bosses that we will have to fight in our journey to become an Elden Lord, but we do not know exactly the extent of their corruption. But what happened to the rest of the inhabitants of the lands between? Quite frankly, it is impossible to know at this time. We know that the shattering ruined the lands between, destroying its cities and its people. That said, it could be that the inhabitants were destroyed, or it could also be that they were tainted and corrupted by the uncontrolled power of the shattered Elden Ring. Maybe the enemies that we fight throughout the lands between used to be its inhabitants living under the grace of gold. Finally, in this new golden order, we find the Tarnished. Once abandoned by the grace of gold, it returns to them and guides them back to the lands between in order to restore the Elden Ring and become an Elden Lord. I believe that this is a survival mechanism of the Erd Tree and the Elden Ring. They call upon the Tarnished to restore the Golden Order to what it once was by restoring the power of the Elden Ring. This is the Golden Order that we will find when we play the game. As the Tarnished, it is our duty to rise through the ranks of this order and become an Elden Lord. It is impossible to know for sure what the Golden Order is exactly, but at this time, this is what I believe it could be. Obviously, I could be very far from the truth, but this is what my intuition is telling me. Do you agree with my theory? Or do you believe that the Golden Order is a church? Or maybe you have a completely different theory of your own. Whatever the case, do not hesitate to let me know in the comments below. I am extremely interested in hearing your opinion and more than happy to analyze any new point of view brought to the table. For now, I would like to thank you for your time, and I hope I get to see you on the next one.